My name is Honora Vale, and at 70 years old, I thought I understood dignity. After 40 years as a nurse, I'd seen people lose everything: memory, mobility, even hope, but I had never seen it handed to someone on a slip of paper. The wedding at Langston Vineyard shimmered in late afternoon light when I arrived. I had spent weeks altering my pale blue dress by hand, sewing under a desk lamp until my eyes watered. It was the same shade my daughter, Tamsin, used to call sky at bedtime. I wore it with small pearl earrings, my one indulgence from the days when hospitals still offered holiday bonuses. The young woman at the registration table smiled without warmth. She searched through a stack of envelopes and pulled one from the bottom, a thin piece of paper with my name in bold, black ink. Limited access guest. No ribbon, no gold edges. Just a strip of tape meant to stick to fabric. I hesitated. "There must be a mistake," I said quietly. She didn't answer, already turning to the next guest. Beside me, another woman laughed as she received her badge, a glossy card on a satin cord reading Family Table. Section 1. The contrast stung more than the spring air. That was when Beatrice Langston approached. She was Tamsin's new mother-in-law. Every inch polished white linen, pearls, perfume heavy with magnolia. Her smile curved as if sculpted, not felt. She leaned close enough for me to catch the chill beneath her sweetness. "That means there's no plate for you," she whispered. Her breath was warm against my ear. Then she drifted away, heels clicking like punctuation. For a moment, I stood there, holding the badge between my fingers, expecting laughter, some correction, some reassurance. None came. Around me, waiters carried trays of champagne, photographers adjusted lenses, and guests posed beneath flower arches as if kindness had never been invented. I pressed the badge to my dress, the paper crinkling over fabric I had stitched myself. I had worn name tags all my life, but always in places where they meant something: wards, emergency rooms, places where a name signaled help. Now it only marked absence. I walked toward the entrance, badge trembling slightly under my hand, and tried to remember how to keep my back straight when the ground shifted beneath it. That was the moment I began to understand what had already been taken from me. When I was 38, the phone rang at dawn. The voice on the other end belonged to a police officer. Slow and careful, as if each word needed permission. He said my husband's name, Javier Vale, and the word collision. By the time I reached the hospital, the nurses I'd trained were waiting in the hallway with eyes that couldn't meet mine. Tamsin was 3. She sat at the kitchen table that morning, eating cereal from a chipped bowl while the cartoon on television hummed on mute. I remember kneeling beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead, and hearing myself say words that felt like sand in my mouth. "Daddy's gone to heaven, sweetheart." Her spoon kept moving. The crunch of cereal was louder than my heartbeat. After the funeral, I returned to Roper Hospital because grief didn't pay bills. I took every shift they offered, day, night, and the hours in between. I wore secondhand scrubs so faded they looked almost gray. My sneakers squeaked from the floor cleaner, soles thinning until I stuffed cotton inside to soften them. Tamsin and I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment on the west side. She got the room. I slept on a pull-out couch beside the heater that hissed like a tired lung. Some nights, when she woke from bad dreams, she'd crawl beside me, knees digging into my ribs, whispering that she missed the sound of her father's guitar. When she needed braces, I canceled a long-saved trip to Savannah. I had planned to go alone for once, to walk the historic squares, maybe sit in a cafe and just exist. Instead, I sat in the dental office signing payment plans with a smile that pretended it was easy. Tamsin's teacher said she was brilliant reading before anyone else, correcting spelling tests for fun. Every time I saw her standing on a stage or holding a certificate, I felt the ache in my back lessen. It meant the sacrifices were landing somewhere safe. I told myself I was building her a bridge across everything I couldn't afford to repair for years. I believed that bridge led to both of us. I didn't know she'd cross it alone. Charleston changed, and so did my daughter. By the time Tamsin finished college, she had learned to pronounce every vowel like the women in her marketing firm soft, clipped, almost British at the ends. She wore beige suits and kept her hair straight, glossy, and deliberate. When she spoke, her hands moved with the confidence of someone who had never had to count tips or stretch soup for 2 meals. The first time she invited me to lunch with her coworkers, I arrived early. I had chosen my best blouse and pressed slacks, still faintly smelling of starch. When she came through the door of the cafe, her heels clicked across the floor like punctuation marks. "Mom," she said with a bright voice. "Everyone, this is my mom. She's a nurse." Then she leaned toward one of the women and added, "From Roper, the night shifts. She's retired now." The group smiled politely, already turning back to their salads. Tamsin slid into the conversation without missing a beat. I sat beside her, listening to words I didn't understand: branding strategies, metrics, client accounts. After a while, I said quietly, "You look happy, sweetheart." She glanced at me and smiled, thin and distant. "I am, Mom. Just busy." "You know," that became her refrain. Busy. Always busy. When I called, she would answer between errands or while half listening. "I'm about to head into a meeting. Can I call you later?" Later rarely came. I left voicemails about the garden, the weather, an old neighbor who'd passed away. Each one sounded smaller than the last. One weekend, she told me she was traveling for work and couldn't visit. That same Sunday, I opened my laptop and saw her tagged in a photo brunch on King Street. A table of mimosas and laughter. Her face was glowing, framed by friends who looked exactly like the life she'd wanted. I stared at the screen until it dimmed to black. Then I whispered the same thing I'd been saying for years, as if it could still make me believe it. "She's busy. That's good." The invitation came as a text. "Coffee, tomorrow at 10, to finalize a few details. Beatrice." No greeting. No question mark. I arrived early at the cafe on Broad Street, the kind of place where even the sugar packets looked expensive. The waitress asked if I wanted a menu. I told her I would wait. I smoothed my cardigan, the one with neat pearl buttons I'd sewn myself, and watched the door. Beatrice Langston entered as if she owned the air. White linen dress, hair pulled tight, pearls resting perfectly on her collarbone. She smiled when she saw me, but didn't hurry. Her steps were measured, graceful, almost rehearsed. "Honora," she said, lowering herself into the chair opposite mine. "I'm so glad you could make time. Wedding planning can be such a balancing act, can't it?" "I imagine so," I said softly. She gestured to the waiter with 2 fingers, never looking up. "A cappuccino, extra foam, and for you, Honora." "Just black coffee," I said. "Thank you." She folded her napkin with delicate precision, then smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "I wanted to thank you for covering the banquet deposit. That was very generous for someone on a nurse's pension." The sentence was smooth, without pause, as if she were complimenting the weather. I kept my smile steady. "I don't mind helping where I can. It's for Tamsin." "Yes," she said, her tone bright. "Such a blessing that she has both families contributing. Though, of course, some of us have more flexibility in these things." Her fingers traced the edge of her cup, manicured nails gleaming. She began describing the wedding's aesthetic soft neutrals. Minimal florals, no bright colors. "I find simplicity so elegant," she added, glancing at my cardigan. I nodded, pretending to take mental notes while her words stacked like polished stones between us. When the check came, she waved the waiter over before I could reach my purse. "I'll take this," she said lightly. "You've already done so much." She brushed invisible crumbs from the tablecloth, her hand slow and deliberate. The gesture said what her smile did not. As I watched her leave, sunlight glinting off her pearls, a thought settled in me like cold air. That was the first time I felt invisible in a room meant for both mothers. The ceremony took place in the garden behind the Langston vineyard, where magnolia arches framed a long white aisle. The air smelled faintly of salt from the nearby marsh, sweetened by roses and the polished confidence of those who belonged there. I sat in the third row, aisle seat, alone. The other seats filled with couples who spoke softly and laughed as if they were performing for a camera. My badge, now hidden in my purse, left a faint mark on the fabric of my dress where the tape had tugged at the threads. Then Tamsin appeared. My breath caught. She was radiant, her gown simple and precise. Hair gathered in a sleek twist that made her look older. Unreachable, the violin began its slow rise. Beatrice stood near the arch, clutching a bouquet as though she had arranged heaven itself. When Tamsin reached the altar, she turned just enough to smile in my direction. It was small and fleeting, but I caught it. For that instant, I could still believe I was part of something. The vows passed in a blur of soft music and bright light. I clapped when they kissed, careful not to be too loud, and brushed away tears before anyone could see. Beautiful ceremony. Wasn't it an older woman beside me said? Yes, I whispered. It truly was. The applause faded into chatter, and guests drifted toward the reception tent. I followed the current, the sound of glassware and laughter spilling through the open doors. A long board near the entrance displayed the seating chart, written in gold calligraphy. I scanned for my name. Family table, wedding party, friends of the couple, extended guests. My name was nowhere, not even under miscellaneous. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne flutes. I reached for one, but he turned away, already serving another group. When I stopped him gently, he blinked as if startled. "Sorry, ma'am," he said, glancing at his list. "I don't see you on the roster. Maybe check with the coordinator." I smiled faintly. "It's all right. I'm used to standing." He nodded, relieved, and moved on. I stepped back into the corner of the room, hands folded, watching my daughter dance beneath lights that shimmered like water on glass. A wall of sound music, laughter, applause rose between us, steady and impenetrable. The reception hall glowed in soft amber light. Laughter floated through the air like a language I no longer spoke. The long table near the entrance overflowed with gifts boxes wrapped in ivory paper, silver ribbons, envelopes sealed with wax. It looked like an altar built to gratitude, but I knew what was missing. I stepped closer, scanning for my handwriting. Near the edge of the table, partly hidden under a pile of ornate cards, was my plain white envelope. No ribbon, no seal, just the words. From Mom in careful cursive. I lifted it gently. The flap had never been opened. Inside was the check, $10,000. My name on the line. My signature steady from years of filling hospital forms. I remembered the nights behind that money, the double shifts, the hours walking fluorescent corridors until my knees throbbed, the canceled holidays, the overtime logged in silence. A young staffer in a black vest hurried over. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, uncertain. "That's already been recorded for the gift list. It needs to stay on the table." I looked at him calmly. "It's a personal check." I said, "It's not a gift until it's accepted." He hesitated, eyes darting toward the stage where Beatrice stood near the microphone, smiling beside the band. "I'm sorry. I folded the check once. Then again, the paper crisp between my fingers. You're doing your job," I said softly, "and I'm doing mine." He stepped aside. I slid the envelope into my purse and zipped it shut. The band started a lively tune. Glasses clinked in time with the rhythm. Tamsin was laughing with a friend. Her face lit by string lights. She didn't see me. As I turned toward the doorway, I heard Beatrice's voice ring out over the speakers. A laugh sharp and bright. It cut through the music like glass breaking. I kept walking, each step steady, measured. No one stopped me at the exit. The night air outside was warm, heavy with jasmine. I breathed in and felt the weight lift. Not from my purse, but from my chest, behind me. The applause swelled again. I didn't turn around. The road back to Charleston was empty except for the hum of tires against the asphalt. Headlights swept over the dark water along Ashley River Road, catching the glint of herons in the reeds. I drove slowly, both hands on the wheel, the folded envelope beside me like a quiet passenger. My phone began to vibrate. Once. Then again. The dashboard lit up with Tamsin's name. Mom, don't do this. Another message, please. I didn't mean for it to go that way. Then, you're overreacting. The words flashed in quick succession, one over the other, until the screen felt like it was shouting. I reached over and turned the phone face down. The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It was deep and alive, the kind that lets you hear your own breathing again. By the time I reached my house, the air had turned thick with night heat. I left the purse on the counter and went straight to the bathroom. The water from the shower hit my shoulders hard, scalding at first, then steady. I stood under it until the steam blurred the mirror, until my chest loosened. When I stepped out, the towel felt heavier than it should have, like a small reminder of the weight I'd been carrying. I made tea in my oldest mug, the one with the chipped rim Javier had once mended with glue. The clock on the stove read close to midnight. The phone still buzzed faintly from across the room, persistent and familiar. I let it. I sat on the couch wrapped in the towel, tea warm in my hands. The lamp cast a single circle of light over the floor. Everything was quiet, the kind of quiet that once used to ache. Tonight, it didn't. For the first time in years, the silence felt earned. It held no blame, no demand to fill it with explanation. It was simply there, like air after a storm, waiting for me to breathe. The message came just after noon, short and careful. Hi, Mrs. Vale. This is Alicia, assistant from the Langston event. Could we meet? I think there's something you should see. We met at a small cafe off King Street, the kind where the music plays softly enough for secrets. Alicia was younger than I remembered, her hair pulled into a nervous bun, a folder clutched tightly in both hands. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice low. I almost didn't reach out, but I thought you'd want to know. I nodded. Go ahead. She opened the folder, fingers trembling slightly, and slid a printed email across the table. At the top it read, Langston Wedding Seating. Final edits. Her finger traced the lines as she spoke. You were here. Originally family table. Position 4, right beside the bride. She turned the page. Then, 4 days before the wedding, there was a revision request from Beatrice Langston. It says, reassign Honora Vale to overflow guests. A small box beside it glowed in pale green ink. Approved. Tamsin Vale Langston. The sound in the cafe faded, as if someone had pressed a finger to the air. I looked at the printout, then at Alicia, who seemed to shrink under the weight of her own decency. I wasn't supposed to say anything, she said quietly, but it felt wrong. I nodded again. It was. She looked startled by how calm I sounded. I wasn't sure where the calm came from, maybe from the certainty that the worst thing had already happened. I folded the paper once, then handed it back. Keep it. You might need your job more than I need proof. She hesitated. I'm sorry, Mrs. Vale. I know. I stood and placed a few dollars on the table for my untouched coffee. So do I. Outside, the sun was harsh against the sidewalk, blinding in its honesty. I walked toward my car feeling strangely light, as if something had been cut loose inside me. It wasn't an oversight. It was a decision. The evening light came in slanted through the kitchen blinds, striping the table where the folded check still lay. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I was rinsing a teacup when the phone began to ring again. Tamsin's name glowing on the screen. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Mom," she said, her voice too steady to be calm. "We can't pay for the honeymoon without that check. The deposit's due tomorrow." I dried my hands on a dish towel and sat down. "You're saying you need me to cover it, I'm saying," she began, then stopped, swallowing hard. "It's just a temporary thing. We didn't plan for all the vendor costs coming in at once. You said it was a gift. Remember?" "Yes," I said. I did say that. Before I realized how easily gifts can be redefined, the silence stretched. I could hear her breathing fast, nervous. Then came the voice she used when she wanted to stay in control. "Mom." I didn't approve that seating change. Beatrice handled the details. "It's not fair to make decisions based on what she did." "Alicia showed me the email," I said softly. Another pause. Then a faint sound, half sigh, half surrender. "Okay," she whispered. "I'm not angry anymore." I told her, "But if I ever give again money, help, anything, it won't be a gift. It'll be under contract. With signatures, with dates and witnesses." Her voice cracked. "You don't mean that." "I mean every word." There was nothing else to say. The line went quiet, filled only by small, uneven breaths. Finally, she said, "Okay," and hung up. I sat there for a long while, the check between my fingers, the ink still clear after so many weeks. It had once meant faith, effort, love written in numbers. Now it was only paper. I picked up my phone, typed a message. "Let's meet for dinner. We can talk." Then I watched my thumb hover over send. Instead, I deleted it. Some statements don't need words. They need absence. Several weeks passed before I stopped expecting the phone to ring. The quiet had settled into the house like a new tenant, unobtrusive, constant, and finally welcome. I started volunteering 3 mornings a week at the Maritime Museum downtown, helping with account ledgers. Numbers never lied, and I liked that. They balanced when you treated them with care. The director, a kind man named Mr. Renfield, told me once, "You keep the book steadier than anyone we've had in years." I smiled and told him steadiness came with practice. At home, the days felt softer. The tulips I had planted in early spring began to rise through the soil purple and strong. The color Tamsin used to call princess flowers when she was little. I planted them for her once. Now I kept them for myself. One afternoon, the mail carrier handed me a small cream envelope. I recognized Tamsin's handwriting before I even looked at the return address. Inside was a folded note, no more than 2 sentences long. "Mom, I'd like to see you. Just tea, no photos, no people, just us." Her words were neat, but uncertain, as if she'd written them more than once. That evening, I took out the good china, the set I'd kept boxed for years. I boiled water, brewed chamomile, and set 2 cups on the kitchen table. Steam curled upward, tracing lines through the fading sunlight. Then I waited, not expectantly, not anxiously, but simply because it felt right to make space, even if no one filled it. Beside the window, my new brass lamp glowed with a warm, steady light. I had asked a local engraver to carve 6 words into its base, built by boundaries, kept by respect. I touched the inscription lightly, the metal cool beneath my fingertips. They had wanted the gift, not the giver. I kept both. Outside, the harbor wind stirred the tulips, bending them gently toward the light. I sat at the table, the untouched second cup still steaming, and felt the kind of peace that didn't ask permission to exist.